Hi everybody, this is Arthi from Human Chapters. I'll tell you a little bit about human chapters. Humans are living narratives with a past, present, and future. These narratives constitute of a number of chapters across a lifespan. The aim of these conversations is to highlight a chapter of the narrative and unpack its connections to other chapters. I don't care whether people are natural storytellers, but I truly do believe each one of us has a story to share. Acknowledgement to country. We acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the lands on which we are. We pay respect to their tribal elders, past and present and emerging. We celebrate the continuing culture and we acknowledge the memory of their ancestors. Today, we are going to be speaking with Manoj. Manoj's chapter is The Burning Bride. I'll pass it on to Manoj to introduce himself. Welcome, Manoj.
Thanks, Arti. So my name's Manoj, and I'm the author of The Burning Bride. So I write as a hobby because I enjoy doing it, but my main day job, I work for Macmillan Cancer Support, which is a cancer charity which gives people emotional support, practical support. They advocate on behalf of people living with cancer, financial support. So loads of different, everything that you need around cancer, Macmillan's there for people. So that's my day job. And a little bit more about me. I enjoy hiking. I enjoy fitness, meeting up with my friends and family. Obviously enjoy writing. I also enjoy learning new things. So very often I sign up to courses that have exams because I learn better with exams. So I did an A-level in Sanskrit, I did British Sign Language. So and now I'm doing life coaching just because it keeps my brain fresh. And and I'm also a Samaritans volunteer. So a little bit about me.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Manoj. Tell us about the journey of The Burning Bride from its conception.
Okay, so I think the idea came to me whilst I was watching a documentary on female infanticide. So how people in India were killing daughters because they wanted sons. So statistics say that the amount of fewer women there are due to female infanticide in India is the entire population of Australia. That's how many women there are missing due to female infanticide. And then the whole process and mentality behind it was just bizarre. But I watched this documentary during Navratri as well, which celebrates the women energy, the feminine energy of the divine and the women within Hinduism. And I just thought it was really bizarre that so many people are worshipping women but find women a burden. And this is kind of where I was like, I need to do something about this, because even before this, I was always in the equity, diversity, inclusion space. Like, it wasn't my main job, but I always drove a lot of these things, whether it was allyship for disabled people, allyship for women, allyship for international students, but even like progressing the LGBTQ and the BAME issues within universities and stuff, or anti-Semitism and stuff. I did a big campaign around equity for Jewish people because I went to a school where there was quite a lot of anti-Semitism. So I did some work around trying to overcome a lot of that. So because I was quite into a lot of these things and I knew I wrote well, I was like, why don't I write something to get the conversation going around this? So and also at the same time, I was reading A Song of Ice and Fire by George R.R. Martin, so the Game of Thrones books. And they're told through multiple perspectives. And I was like, why don't I tell a story about violence against women through 9 different perspectives and use the 9 different perspectives to also highlight psychological, cultural, and social factors which prop up systems of violence against women? So don't just explore it through the victim's perspective, but explore it through the abuser's perspective, through the mother who forces her daughter to stay in this abusive relationship through the nosy neighbor who sees everything but doesn't do anything about it. So tackle this story about domestic violence through all the people that are involved in maintaining these systems of violence against women in South Asian. So I think if you read it, you'll find that a lot of these things are also relevant to not just India, but Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Nepal, because they're all South Asian communities. But there's also one woman who tells the story who's a white British woman. And the purpose of that is very often the West will look at the East and be like, oh, women have it so hard there. Whereas like when I first joined the call and said we're both wearing red, we were matching. And I told you I'm wearing red because and my trousers are white today, which you can't see, but the England women's team have made it to the finals today. The support there isn't the same level that the men had. Women get paid less than men for doing exactly the same job. Sexual assault survivors aren't taken as seriously. So there's still a lot of inequities for women here as well. So the purpose of the white British woman telling the story is also so the West know that there's a lot of gender inequities within the Western world as well. And it's not and patriarchy doesn't just impact the East.
Yes, absolutely. That was so well put, Manoj. I would love to know when you started writing the book with the 9 different perspectives and trying to incorporate all of those social factors. Did you base it on true events? Is it purely fictional? What's that process like?
So the story is a work of fiction, but it's inspired by reality. So it's not a true story, but on the front cover, it says inspired by real stories. And that's because I got a lot of backlash and hate from India saying this is lies, this is made up, like this is not true. So to counter the fact that people were saying that this wasn't true, I added it inspired by real stories. Right. So it's an entire work of fiction, but I did a lot of research. So I met people, I watched documentaries, I read newspaper articles, I read books around it. But I also mentioned that I was a Samaritan's volunteer. We learn how to talk to people, how to empathize with people, put ourselves in other people's shoes, so we can help their mental health and stuff. So I often did that as well, because I did a psychology degree as my undergraduate and anthropology as my master's. And with that, we learned a lot of things around the human psyche and society and how certain things are replicated within society because of humans, but also because of society and laws themselves. Yes. So using this knowledge, I kind of put myself in the shoes of these 9 different women that I started telling the story of, putting their stories in. And so I get a lot of people saying, how have you as a man written really well as 9 different women? And part of it's the whole process of using empathy, using the knowledge that you have around certain issues and seeing how you would feel if these factors were put into your lives, and then write as that. So yeah, was that the question? Did I just go off on a whole different tangent? I have a habit of doing that sometimes.
No, that's totally fine. You captured my interest. So I'm trying to think back to the question. And I think, yes, it was, how did you come up with the 9 different perspectives, and what exactly did you do? And would you be, like, this is totally fine if you don't want to answer it or don't want to give too much away in terms of the book, but can we unpack one particular story, whichever perspective really stood out to you, and go through?
I think the perspective that really stands out to me, which I don't want to unpack too much because it's full of spoilers, but I tell the story through the point of view of the abuser as well. So I did a psychology degree and we studied the Nazis and why they did what they did to the Jewish people. So there were certain experiments done by Milgram, by Zimbardo and Mies and Reich and stuff. So I kind of used that to set a template for the abuser. So very often people are like, how on earth can one human inflict these acts of violence against other humans?
Yeah.
And very often there's a very big psychological process involved in being able to get to that stage where you're able to inflict pain onto other humans.
Yeah.
So I really unpicked that through the perspective of the abuser. So you saw the psychological process of how it started off quiet, like Milgram talked about something called the foot in the door effect, where things are gradual increments.
Okay, yeah.
So because they're gradual increments, they don't seem so bad to you. Like it might start with name calling, dehumanizing, it might start with pinching, slapping, and then punching, and then eventually get to murder sort of thing. And this is something that we often see in domestic violence as well, where at the start it can be very easy, very cool, very fine. Then it starts with name calling, it starts with emotional abuse, manipulation, gaslighting.
Yeah.
And then if it progresses to like pushes and shoves, and then it could ultimately end in murder.
Yeah.
And that's because of the foot in the door effect, where all of these increments are very slow, that people become dehumanized to that person's humanity. So we kind of see that through one of the perspective characters' mentality, how because it wasn't nipped in the bud very early on, how far this character goes to push her reign of terror onto this person because it had never been nipped in the bud early enough.
Yes. Yeah. Wow. And that's
and again, the onus isn't on the victim or other people to nip it in the bud, but it's showing you how, like, it's showing you the multifaceted story through like all the 9 different people who are involved in this story. Like, had the nosy neighbor said something and nipped it in the bud, it could have something could have happened. Had the victim tried to defend herself, something could have happened. But it's very easy for people to say, why didn't the victim defend herself? Because very often people do say, why doesn't she just leave? And the story explores exactly why she doesn't just leave. Like, what are the other things that are holding her back and binding her to this place? It shows you why it's not just easy for a woman to just be like, get out, I'm leaving this relationship. So yeah, I think probably the most fascinating character is the perpetrator of the violence. And through her story, you'll unpick everything from her past, similar to what we're doing now. You'll unpick her past, you'll unpick her present, and you'll see the whole process of how she gets to where she's got to.
Yeah. Wow. And the other thing I was thinking about is one of the things you've done within your book is have threads of Mahabharata, or sort of that divinity. Explain that bit of incorporation into.
I think there's one of the reasons for that is a lot of people use religion to try and justify their shitty behavior.
Yeah.
And there is a lot, even within my own community, there are a lot of people who say, in Gujarati, they'll say, oh, it says this in our religion. It doesn't. Like, I did an A-level in Sanskrit, and I've been quite fascinated by religion. So I did a lot of research because I didn't believe it when I was younger. I was like, this is all rubbish. Like, all the people that are saying stuff, I'm like, no, it doesn't wash with me. Like, the caste system, no, this, no. But when you start researching stuff and what the scriptures actually say, you realize that most of these people have no idea what they're on about. Like, they have no idea what they're talking about. So the reason I put in a lot of Hindu stories was, one, to get rid of some of the myths that are there about Hinduism saying this about women, and to highlight a lot of very powerful women within. So we highlight Draupadi, we highlight Kalratri, Katyayani, but we also highlight the other women like Sita, like Savitri and stuff as well. So it's putting a spotlight on these women who shape Indian women, but highlighting other facets of them. Because, for example, very often people will highlight, oh, Sita did this for Rama, like Sita always did this for Rama, but no one ever tells men that Rama did this for Sita. Like Rama always saw Sita as his equal, not his inferior. So this comes out in the book that if society is always telling women, be like Sita, be like Savitri, why is the same pressure not on men that be like Rama, be like Satyavan, or various other male personalities within the scriptures who are doing this? But also, why is it that women are always told be like Sita, but no one ever says be like Draupadi, who was like fire, like literally born from the fire and like burnt all the men that tried to abuse her and stuff. And so this is what it's kind of looking into as well, how women are told to aspire to be like certain women who hold up these patriarchal systems, but women within Hindu scriptures who broke down these patriarchal systems are not given as role models to younger women. So this is another reason why some of these things are in there as well. So to show people that very often in certain faiths, women play the role of the mother or the wife, whereas Hinduism has the teacher, the leader, the queens, the warriors, the mothers and the sisters and the daughters, but also the political leaders and everything. So there's so many different roles that women play within, and it's not just in Hinduism. Like if you look at history of Sikhism or other Eastern religions, women play so many focal figures in this. So one of the reasons I really threaded in religion through this was to show, one, the hypocrisy of a lot of the people who follow this religion and say certain things, but also to get people to aspire to be Draupadi, to be, and not just aspire to be one of this, that pull out their good qualities and put them into their lives and encourage women to not just be wives and daughters.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is so well put. And now we're seeing this real shift and movement within the Southeast Asian women, particularly in the younger generations, where they are questioning a lot of these stereotypes. They're rebelling against it.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I'm really, really proud of is when I first released this book in 2015, so it's been quite a while.
Yeah.
A lot of people used to say, oh, this doesn't happen in our community, this doesn't happen. It was, I was, the one thing that really, really surprised me was not the amount of women that came forward to share their own examples of domestic violence, but the amount of women who came forward to say they really, really, really embarrassingly resonated with the nosy neighbor who didn't do anything to help. Like she knew what was happening, but she turned a blind eye. Yeah. So one of the characters is the active bystander who sees everything but gossips about it, but doesn't do anything constructive for it. I was blown away by the amount of women who came forward to say they resonated with that.
Yeah.
And a lot of them said, as of now, I'm making an active pledge to not be that person anymore. And it kind of snowballed. Like in my community, it's now been 7 years since I released it. 7 years ago, domestic violence was not talked about, like it was a very taboo topic. This book brought it to the forefront. A lot of toxic relationships have ended as a result of this, because a lot of people message me saying, I found the courage to leave because of you, or my friend found the courage to leave because of you, because of this. There's been the dark side to it as well. Like I get accused of corrupting women. I get accused of corrupting the nuclear family and stuff as well. And my response to that always is, it's not me who's corrupted the relationship. It's the people that were the perpetrators of the violence and the abuse. Like they've had plenty of opportunities to change their ways as well. Like some of these abusers may have read what I was writing and they had an opportunity to learn from it and change their ways as well. But this is what I'm saying, like very often people will blame people for certain things, but not look at their own actions or their own responsibility that they've played. So Yeah, I think I'm really pleased with where the conversations got to after the release of these books, and potentially the amount of women whose lives have been saved as a result of this book. So
it would
yeah.
have been such a significant outcome, intentional or not, as a result of this book. But getting the conversation going, and particularly in light of all the changes that have happened in the last few years, domestic violence stats are off the roof.
Yeah,
Just
they really went up during lockdown for women all over the world, like not just in the UK where the lockdown was much more stricter. And again, it goes into that whole, how does the abuse go up again? Like, my book doesn't explore this because lockdown wasn't a concept unheard of, but you can apply that in here because when you're with each other so long, the perpetrator's frustration levels are higher, but the opportunities for abuse are also much more there because they're not seeing other people. And because of that, it really catalyzes the foot in the door effect, where it really speeds it up. So this is why there are so many more instances of domestic violence during the lockdown. And even now, like, there's a lot of people who haven't left because of what happened then. People lost their jobs, people are financially dependent on the abuser, perpetrator, there are children involved, but there are certain relationships where domestic violence didn't even happen pre-pandemic, but it happens now post-pandemic. So
the Manoj, the other thing I probably would love to unpack is, and you mentioned this, lots of people resonated with the nosy neighbor that actively do anything. Can we unpack that a little bit to go, why is it that that actually happens? Why is it people don't do? It's
So again, I used psychological theories to shape her as well, but also in real life. Very often people assess the pros and cons for them in intervening. So very often people will see, what is it that I can say without facing repercussions? You see this often on Instagram, where I know some people who will share stuff about gender inequality, but they won't share stuff about racism. Like, because they're worried that they may face backlash from their friends. But I also know some people who will share, some men who will share stuff about feminism, or not feminism, more like the Roe and Wade abortion thing, right? Debate recently. They'll share that, but their intent behind that is looking good to women who they're interested in, as opposed to it coming, I'm sure it comes from a good place as well, because they're still doing work of an ally, but there's a deeper vested interest in why some people are sharing certain things. And the reason I draw on Instagram is there's so many things that are happening out there. People might not be aware of, but sometimes a lot of people didn't share Black Lives Matter or talk about that, or shared the black box whilst it was cool, whilst everyone else was. But off the back of that, after, a lot of people haven't been sharing big racism issues and cases. So this is what I'm saying, again, with that nosy neighbor, where people will evaluate what the pros and cons are for them to intervene in this. Do I want to go down? Do I want the hassle of speaking to the police? Do I want the hassle of going to court and stuff? Do I want to face repercussions for being the person who supported it? And sometimes, in my book, Bulbai is friends with the abuser. So does she want to lose that friendship by calling them out? So there's all of these things that are going through this bystander's mind, where do I value my friendship over the victims? Do I want the court cases that are going to come, and as a witness, do I want to have all the pressures and the hurdles? Isn't it just a much easier life for me if I just know what's happening but don't intervene? So, and so there's a lot of things like that people process when they're going through. Like, you'll see it even on the streets sometimes, where when someone's been beaten up and everyone's watching, part of that is because people don't feel safe in themselves, so self-preservation is important. But you'll also notice that sometimes if one person intervenes, then everyone else will come forward.
Yes, that's exactly right. Giving others the permission to do so, then it becomes a collective.
Yeah.
My other question to you, Manoj, how was this book and the story received by your own family?
Oh, my own family were great. Like, my own family were great about it. Very, very supportive about it. Very, my family were so good about it. Like, not just my immediate family, my cousins, they advocated people to read this, and they got a lot of people to read it. Not all of them have read it. Like, not a lot of my family and friends or people have read it, but there are some people said that they would find the topic too emotionally difficult, which is fair enough. Like, and for some of my friends who said that they'd find it difficult, I did go through the entire book marking trigger warnings on pages. So, like, one of my cousins said that she really wants to read it, but she'll find it difficult. So I said to her, do you want me to go through and put post-it notes on pages that I know that have very difficult themes and tell you exactly what that chapter contains? And she said yes. And she actually read the entire thing and she loved it, but she said she appreciated those trigger warnings at the start of each chapter. So it got her into the mentality of what was coming up in that chapter. So yeah, but also I think what's very interesting is a lot of non-Indian people have read this book.
Yes.
A lot of and they've loved it because they've learned so much from it. But what I find is I worked somewhere where a white colleague released a book and I had my book as well. Everyone read the white person's book, but only 3 or 4 of my colleagues read my book. And these kinds of things are stuff, I don't bring it up. I never bring this sort of thing up because I don't want to be like, buy my book. But, and also there's a lot of things that I don't bring up. Like, I notice some of these things when I work, but I don't bring these things up. I bring up much bigger things, but I don't bring up small things like this because to me, it's a little bit like a sick game where once they stop doing certain microaggressions, I know that they've grown as allies or they like me better. So I don't raise these sort of things, like, because I think this sort of thing helps me to understand where I really fit in and how I really fit in with certain things. So yeah.
That's brilliant. Manoj, I've just sent you a second link because this will time out. What we might do, I do have a few more questions. Can we go into the next link and then,
Yeah, let's do that. See you in a few minutes.
Yeah. Okay, so this is just the continuation of Manoj's chapter, The Burning Bride. Manoj, we ended with, this is going to test my active listening skills.
I think we were talking about the book and the reception that I had from my family, and then I talked about the reception it had from friends, family, colleagues, and other people as well. So yeah.
Correct. The other question was, earlier you mentioned that you'd watched the documentary, and this was at the beginning of the conversation, you'd watched the documentary, and then with the during that time, it was Navratri. Now, Navratri celebrates 9 days. So it's a 9-day celebration celebrating a woman, is it, each day? Did that have significance within?
So it's, yeah, Navratri celebrates the feminine energy of God, and the women deities, and it had the significance was that this is where the whole idea was born from, and everything that comes with it, because it was an oxymoron that, and you could see the cognitive dissonance of people who are worshipping women but inflicting acts of violence against women. So that whole, it was unpicking the whole psyche behind it. Like, how is it that people are doing this? Like, do they not see the hypocrisy of this? And this is how I unpicked it through different people who are involved in this story, sort of thing.
And that's a great segue into my next question, which was actually going to be, do people realize what they're doing, particularly when it's at a micro level of inflicting abuse, whether it's emotional, verbal, or whatever nature of that abuse? Do they realize that they're doing it? Or
I think when it's micro levels of abuse or microaggressions, people don't realize what's happening. But it's important that you do sometimes educate them. But microaggressions, whether it's conscious or unconscious, they're always seeped into your mentality and your thoughts and stuff. So for example, there are, at where I work right now, there was someone who wouldn't talk to me. Like, I'm very friendly, I'll talk to everyone at Macmillan. And when I'd go to the kitchen, I'd say, hello, how are you? This person would be like, yeah, fine, thank you. Never ask the question back to me. Or how was your weekend? Yeah, it was good. Again, never ask the question back to me. My initial reaction is, okay, it's fine. This person isn't very chatty, and that's okay. Like, not everyone is an extrovert who wants to have conversations. That's okay. But then I saw this person's behavior with a white colleague. And the question was returned. Like, the question was, how, I'm fine, thanks. How are you? And then my mentality was, maybe this person knows that person better. Like, they're friends and I was just someone new, so it's fine. But then later that week, I talked to the other woman who was my friend, and I was like, oh yeah, you were talking to, imagine it was you who was doing the microaggressions. I was like, oh yeah, I saw you were talking to Aarti in the kitchen that day. And she was like, who's Aarti? I don't know who Aarti is. So then I realized that they weren't friends, that this person, and then for me, it was like, okay, maybe this person just doesn't like me, and that's okay as well. Like, people don't have to like me, it's fine. But then 2 other BAME people said exactly the same thing about this person. So it was, and then I got to the point where I was like, I have so many friends, I don't need to talk to this person. Like, and then I just stopped talking to this person. Like, I'd go to the kitchen and I wouldn't say hello or anything. This person then started talking to me, like wanting to talk to me, wanting to find out more. And I got to the point where once I changed teams I went onto a new floor, this person would say, oh my God, we really miss you on our floor because it's not the same now that you're gone. So it was a whole change but I had to be the one who stopped talking to this person because I don't, but so I think that these things are unconscious, like people are unaware, but the fact that this person behaved that way with 3 non-white people shows that there is some level of consciousness involved there as well. There is some level of, they know that they think that we're different to the other people.
Correct.
And that's what's there. So when we're talking about these levels of abuse and microaggression, there is a superiority complex there that they know about, that they know that I am better than this and I'm going to behave in this way to you because I don't think you're worth my time. So there are certain things that happen where I don't question it. I just get on with it. But I know that these people are behaving this way because of certain things. And it's not just me, like other, now I corroborate with other people, like, have you experienced this from this person? And they will say yes. So like, there are certain people who they'll say stuff to me. There's certain men and women will always say, this man speaks to me in this manner.
Yeah.
And my experience of that person is not the same, but when so many women are saying this person speaks to me in that manner, you have to listen to them, but you also know that person is behaving in that manner to a lot of women. But it's the same when people are behaving that way to gay people or to BAME people or certain groups, that they might not know consciously that we're doing this, but there is something in their mentality that they are aware of, which is why they're behaving in this way. And these behaviors are manifesting unconsciously because they haven't worked on certain biases and consciousness that they've got in their mind.
That is, and that's so interesting. Like, people do things, if they're unconscious of it, then the process of it becoming conscious, that's a whole different ball game. And I think
and if the process becomes conscious to you too quickly, then you kind of step back a bit because it's gone too quickly.
Yes.
So you kind of see how after the Black Lives Matters movement, or even the Me Too movement, it really polarized some people. So it made a lot more allies, which is what women, what BAME people needed, even Pride, like it got the lot of allies that we need, but equally it brought out all of the people from the woodworks who got more polarized onto the other side because they felt that, and once their mentality came out into once they were aware of where they were able to go further into it. Does that make sense? Like, they were able to hone this into being a bit more of a dick, basically.
That's right. That's come into their consciousness. And that's then now your brain is attending to it, in a sense.
Yeah.
The other thing that I'd like to ask you, Manoj, is earlier you said even before the book or anything, you were always involved in a space of equity, inclusion, diversity, all of those things. Has this been the case since you were a child? What resonates with you, and why do you want to be? Why are you drawn to that space?
I think for me, I have I was excluded a lot when I was a child. So I experienced quite a lot of bullying at school and exclusion. So it's made me who I am today, where I'm keen to include everyone, where I will make sure that people are all comfortable, who are all happy and stuff. So I'm fine about it, but because of my own experiences of bullying and abuse and exclusion and stuff, I've been able to use this to help other people and make sure that they feel included and stuff. So I think I didn't quite understand certain things, even though there was this history. I didn't understand how systems and institutionalization and stuff could be embedded. So I credit a lot of my understanding for that, but also the women's officer, who was the women's officer at Goldsmiths in in my first year. I remember asking her, why is there no men's officer? Like, women are 66% at Goldsmiths and men are 33%. So should there not be a men's officer? Because we have a BAME officer because we're the minority. We have a disabled students officer because they're the minority.
Yeah.
We have a LGBTQ officer because they're the minority as well. But why is there a women's officer and not a men's officer was my question. And she said to me, yeah, men are the minority on this campus, but look at the statistics of sexual assault. They're mostly against women in this campus. Look at the leadership in this place. It's mostly men in this place. Why is it that more than half of the committee for the Students' Union and the sabbatical team are men and not women? So she, even the whole leadership of Goldsmiths, like the top 3 people that were, we called it the wardens. So the wardens, they were all men. So she told me all of these things, and that just really opened my eyes to a lot of things around how inclusion wasn't just about who you could see more of. There's way more to it, and institutionalization of inequities and stuff. And then I went on to become the country's, I got elected to run the Students' Union in my 5th year at Goldsmiths, but in my first year I had a different role. Okay. In my second year of the role, I became the UK's first welfare and diversity officer at a Students' Union, where I looked after the mental health and the emotional health and well-being of students, and physical well-being, but also the inclusion and equity, diversity spaces in that. So that really helped to do stuff. One of the few infuriating things is I was doing a lot of these things like 10 years ago. Some of the conversations that are being had now, I was doing it 10 years ago. And it's frustrating that it's like a cycle, that I'm having these same conversations again and the same hurdles all over again. But yeah.
And do you find that as a result of your book, the work you're currently doing, that the conversations, they're the same, but are they better in quality? Has there been that shift?
In some sense, yes, but in other senses, no.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's getting to the point where I'm fed up of being the villain as well, because when you're the person who's driving these things and highlighting these things, you automatically become the villain. You become the problem in this and not the solution to this. And I'm finding more and more as I get older that I'm less willing to become the problem now, like, because very often a lot of people trust me, like they'll tell me everything about their lives, they'll talk to me about a lot of things, but then there'll also be the issue where either it's then on me to try and change these things or try and help these things. But in doing so, I become the enemy of a lot of people.
Yes.
And this does impact certain things in my life. So it impacts my career, it impacts certain other things as well. And very often when it's me that needs that support, the people aren't as vocal as I am around them. So I think as I'm getting older, I'm beginning to think that I need to be more strategic with how I drive change. So the Burning Bride was a great way of driving change because it did it without me having to put so much energy into it, like the book just did it. So I'm going to be telling more stories like that, where I'm able to use storytelling as a tool to drive change, rather than holding people to account or telling them this is what you did and this is how it landed. So
That's right. And I suppose the concept and notion of driving change, it starts with one person, but you really want to believe it's a collective effort as well,
yeah.
right? For
Mm-hmm.
one person to be doing all of that driving, it is burdensome, it's heavy, absolute great responsibility. And how sustainable is it? Is always
Yeah.
the question. Whereas if it's a collective effort, the vision doesn't necessarily have to be 100% shared. But if it's a partial sharing, then it's still something that's better in that collective effort.
Yeah.
Um, and speaking of driving change, what are some good ways that people, like, say you want to be able to have more conversations in the room, you want to destigmatize the domestic violence conversations or just abuse in general? What are some good ways of actually doing that?
And in terms of domestic violence, I think it's bringing it to the bringing the conversation to the forefront a lot more. So normalizing conversations around it, because there are certain things which are very taboo.
Yeah.
And there are certain things which are emotionally exhausting and emotionally draining, because sometimes there's things like there are abusers who are very, very charismatic, and to the outside world,
Yeah.
they're very, very charismatic, that people wouldn't believe the victim that this is what's happening.
Yeah.
So it's important that people start having conversations around the different types of abuse that there is. So abuse isn't just physical, it can be emotional, it can be it could be financial abuse, it could be, so there's like 8 different types of domestic abuse, and violence is just one of them. So having conversations about what it looks like and around that would be useful. But people sharing that, if they're brave enough and feel strong enough, people sharing that lived experiences could also be inspiration to people, because you can't, very often I can get shouted down by saying that's not true, and I can say that I've spoken to this many people and they might say those people are lying or something, but people can't shout down someone sharing their own story. Like
That's exactly right.
you can't be shot down for someone sharing their own story. So sometimes when I talk about certain other people experiencing racism, people might turn around and say, oh, did that really happen? Or, ooh, blah, 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 blah. Whereas when I'm sharing my experiences, they have to take what I've said, because it's my own experience, it's my story. And people do ask questions, which is fine, because it's okay to ask questions and try and understand a bit better, but they can't it's harder for them to deny that this happened, because very often I'm also the type of person that before I say anything, before I say something is racism or homophobic or stuff, I will make sure that it is, because it could do a lot of damage saying something is something without knowing full well.
That's exactly right. No, that's really lovely. Yeah, conversations, and really for people to share their experiences, which that in itself is a huge thing, isn't it? To share
Mm,
your own experience, to say it out loud to someone else, then that's a bit of accountability as well, where you go, oh, I've shared it, then yeah, whatever's to happen next, that's probably not in the person's control, but the fact that they had the courage to share it has
yeah.
been huge. Yeah. Um, Thank you so much for this conversation, Manoj. I think it's been so wonderful to sort of have that backstory and thinking around how did you construct the Burning Bride? How did you,
Mhm.
like, what went on behind the scenes? Has there been something I haven't asked you about, or something I haven't touched that you might have wanted to say?
I'm not sure actually. I think we covered quite a lot of what it is. I'm sure if other questions came up, like I'd have loads more to talk about and say, but off the top of my head, I can't think of anything
That's
that happens. But I think one of the things is, at first I was a bit surprised how this conversation went from gender inequality to racism, but also we touched upon other things. But I think the reason that it's important is because a lot of the perpetrators exhibit similar mentalities. They're similar processes involved in what's involved in some of the processes involved in gender inequalities. The processes are similar. The landing and the feelings that people have are similar as well. So it's important that we kind of look at all forms of discrimination as, if someone was sexist to me, how would I feel? Okay, so this is how someone would it react to homophobia or ableism or racism or xenophobia or whatever there is. So yeah, it's important. I think I wasn't expecting to talk about racism in conjunction with gender inequalities today, but actually it does make sense that there's a lot of overlaying
exactly.
strands with this. So
Exactly. And it is. And there are so many of those interconnections that, they, and this is what's happening in the systems, is that they are siloed so frequently, and
mhm,
therefore the interconnections either go masked or just not brought to the surface. Whereas when we're having a chat like such as this one, through conversations, we can clearly see those interconnections. We can
yeah,
clearly see how a lot of it is linked, but then how a lot of that is then therefore has connections to human personality, traits, mannerisms, and things of that nature.
yeah.
No, thank you very much. It's been fantastic. Just recently, one of the groups that I'm a part of on Facebook, they had shared your book, and
Mhm.
it was a bit of a quick summarized version, and I was like, oh well, I will be so happy to be sharing this conversation once it's all uploaded onto Facebook, YouTube, and podcast. um,
Yeah,
that thread to,
yeah,
because I think you can read a book, but then actually understanding the author's process and where they're drawing their information from, or just, yeah, that the thread of psychology versus sociology versus religion, there are so many aspects um,
yeah.
to it. So thank you very much. Any final 3 to 5 key takeaways for anyone in the world listening to this conversation?
3 to 5 takeaways. I think I've mentioned quite a few of them, so I think I might make them a little bit more generalized. Like, I think the first thing is, don't be an active bystander. Like, by you challenging stuff, you will inspire other people around you to also challenge stuff. So do it, but also make sure you're safe doing it, because it's important that you're not endangering yourself by being an ally. So yeah, make sure you're safe, and make sure you do, if you are safe, challenge it, because you not only empower others around you to do the same, but you also give some comfort to the people who are living those experiences. I think the second thing is learn and read. Like, try and learn and read things that change the way that you think about the world, because we often experience the world in our way, like with our privileges, with our mentalities, but we very rarely stop to think about how things could happen for other people. And there are certain things that I've read which completely changed the way I look at the world, which I'm really grateful for that I had the opportunity to do that. So get out of your comfort zone, start watching things, reading things, talking to people that you wouldn't normally talk to, and see how much you can learn from them. And I think the third thing I would say is be kind. Like, when we talk about being kind, very often we want the kindness to us, but we're not very good at giving that kindness back to other people. So the first 2 points I've said to us will help us to be kinder to other people as well. So it's important that we use these 3 things to work together to try and make ourselves better, and by making ourselves better, make the world better for people as well.
Absolutely. No, thank you very much, Manoj, for the beautiful 3 key takeaways, and hopefully anyone listening to it will resonate with them. Thank you in advance to all the people that will be watching this conversation or listening to it on podcast. So this conversation will be available on Facebook, Human Chapters page, any podcast platform, and on YouTube as well. So please feel free to share it as widely as possible, because I think this particular conversation is really such an important one and should be shared globally, because no one is immune to that idea of abuse. We're all, it's not limited to an ethnicity, it's not limited to a race, it's global.
Yeah.
So,
and if anyone has any more questions, or they want to know anything, feel free to get in touch with me on Facebook or Instagram or whatever. I'm happy to answer more questions if people have any more questions off the back of this conversation. So yeah.
That's right. And I will be putting a link to your book in the show notes as well, just so that people can find it. And we are going to be, actually, my partner and I would love to read it and discuss the book together. Thank you.
Let me know what you think when you're done.
Yes. I'll stop recording this now, but thanks, guys.
No, thanks.